All right, welcome to introducing the DiabDOCS, National Physician Scientist Training Program. Today, we have Dr. Linda DiMeglio. She's a graduate of Harvard College and the University of Pennsylvania School of Medicine. She completed a residency in pediatrics at Children's Memorial Hospital, now Lurie Children's in Chicago, and her pediatric endocrine fellowship at Indiana University School of Medicine. She also completed her MPH at IU, and she's a graduate of the Executive Leadership in Academic Medicine Fellowship Program. And right now she's a professor and the chief of the Division of Pediatric Endocrinology and Diabetology in the Department of Pediatrics at Riley Hospital for Children in Indianapolis, Indiana. She's also the Indiana Clinical and Translational Research Institute Director of Career Development, and that comes in handy in this circumstance, and co-chairs the CTSI Pediatric Project Development Team. She's a member of ISPAD, the Guidelines Editorial Board, and she also directs local and national research teams focusing on preventing type 1 diabetes, preserving beta cell function, and improving metabolic control and quality of life for persons living with the disease. It sounds like in her spare time, she's also engaged in research in metabolic bone diseases, on top of an active clinical practice, caring for children with diabetes and endocrine disorders and mentoring trainees. So amazing. And she's a well-known, scientist and clinician in the field. And we really are excited to hear what's going on with this new initiative, DiabDOCS, from her today. And in a moment, we will have Dr. David Maahs coming to us from Stanford. He's partnered with his longstanding colleague, Dr. DiMeglio, to submit this MPI, DiabDOCS, or Diabetes Docs, Physician Scientist Career Development Program, which is, called DiabDOCS. And they've developed an outstanding team by including other investigators who expressed interest in the RFA, including previous K12 programs and outreach to physician scientist colleagues national. So they're very excited to, present to us today. And I'll ask Dr. DiMeglio, can you start off and just set the stage for what is this new initiative and what do people need to know about it?
Yeah, so thanks, Monica. Thanks for the introductions. And David will be joining us. I'll also introduce on the call Kamal Dasani, who's our program administrator, who's here newly in her role and enthusiastically in her role. So people who interact with the program will be interacting with Kamal as well as with David and me. So basically, as I understand it, there have been historically 5 and then 6 K12 programs across the country. I see that Christy here is from Boston Children's, so one has been at the Joslin, but the others were in Philadelphia, in Denver, and there was one at Stanford, which was more recent, which David Maahs led, and I'm missing one, sorry. So Boston, Philadelphia, Yale was another one with Bill Chamberlain and as the PI. And so basically the NIDDK decided to model this new program on 2 other programs. Actually, we learned later there was a 3rd program, but programs that were national K-12 programs, rather than have people move to a given institution to do a K-12 because there are only so many people. As much as Boston is amazing, having been there undergrad, Boston, New Haven, Philadelphia, Denver, Stanford, like as much as those are amazing places to live and great institutions to be at. I mean, I'd had a K, my K was in bone disease, but I don't know that I would have moved to an institution at that time to do my K award. And so it had these national K-12 programs, as I understand it, started with a neurosurgery program, but then also there was there's a child neurology K-12 program, and then also a pediatric intensive care, critical care K-12 program. And so the folks at NIDDK saw these other programs, particularly modeling after the child neurology K-12 program, which has been, it's like in its 7th or 8th year, and it's been very successful, and decided that rather than fund these institutional K-12s, that they would fund a national program. And so David Maahs and I got to know each other about a decade ago. We were both co-chairs for the Type 1 Diabetes Exchange Registry back when the Exchange Registry was in its heyday. And at the time when we were co-chairs of the Exchange Registry, we both always pushed for the involvement of junior scientists, so younger, earlier career scientists, and all the efforts that the Exchange was doing. So actually, when I got funded by the Helmsley trust for a study of continuous glucose monitoring in very young children. Each site in the study had a junior investigator partnered with a senior PI. And but David and I had done that consistently. A couple of years ago, there was a call for a single institutional K12, and both David and I put in applications. And in the end, only one was funded, and his was funded, but we stayed friends after that. And so anyway, so when the RFA came out for this call for these institutions, this national K12 program through NIDDK, he called me like within 24 hours of the RFA going up and said, we need to do this together. I had not run an institutional K12 in the past because I didn't get the grant that I'd gone in for with David. But I have been running a K12 program for our CTSA. So we have a award across Indiana, and there's 4 different institutions that send scholars. And I've been that's a director of career development role. So I've been doing the career development curriculum for that program. And helping with scholar selection and helping with scholar mentoring in that program for several years. So I had the background in on the K side, having been a K scholar, but then also having worked with that program for many years. And we reached out to all the PIs of the existing K12 programs, and we got them all on board with us to be part of this. And then we also added to that group Raghu Mirmira as a basic scientist at University of Chicago, and Sharita Golden from Hopkins, who is an adult endocrinologist and expert in many areas of diversity. And we put together this coalition basically of sites to do this program.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I mean, this is such an important piece of, getting, really passionate and, interested people on board to study type 1 diabetes. And not only do you have it set up so that it's, they're invited in and they're going to compete to get into these spaces, but also once they get there, not only do they get the funding, they get the mentorship, which, for an EC scientist is so very important, especially when they're, a clinician scientist, I think.
Yeah. And for this particular program, we're hoping to leverage the national nature of the program. So firstly, to leave scholars at their own institutions or wherever they choose to study. I mean, they could move to another institution if they wanted to do the program. But then also, in addition to having a local mentor within the program, part of the program will be that we will assign people an arm's length mentor from another institution outside. So if I have a scholar here in Indiana, I might assign them somebody from Denver or somebody from USC or just someplace else. We're not sure. I think the mentor assignments will probably be tailored for the external mentor, will be tailored to the scholar needs a little bit. So if like my mentor, if I want to do microbiome work and my mentor here is not expert in microbiome, even though they can help me navigate the local institution, we might try to network with somebody more in their scientific area. On the other hand, many scholars have good mentorship already in their scientific area, but may need more of a life course mentor or like somebody who can help with politics at their institution or whatever they need. So
yeah,
that'll be an advocate.
Yeah, it's really fantastic. And I love the idea of getting different perspectives from different places, because as we all know, different institutions do things differently.
Yes.
And they have access to different materials and different protocols, different data sets, et cetera. So it's really nice to be able to match, someone with someone at another institution. It gives a real diversity flavor, and a different perspective, which we always are very excited about here at Sugar Science. I think that whole idea of getting the different voices and different perspectives to weigh in on this issue is critical.
Mm-hmm.
Did you want to, kind of go before, I know that Dr. Maahs is joining us soon, but did you want to talk a little bit about, maybe dive in to why NIH is, wanting to sort of, push this forward now?
Yeah, I mean, I think some of it has to do, we all know that there's like a vanishing species of physician scientists. And so part of the goal here is to make sure that there's a group of physician scientists. So in order to be eligible for this K award, you have to be a physician. You have to be engaged in some clinical work. So even though if you have an MD or an MD equivalent degree, if you're not doing clinical work or not planning to do clinical work, you would not be, that's not the intention of this program. And I think I think really by changing from institutional K-12s, many of which have done very, very well. I mean, there have been, and many scholars have done great coming out of those programs. I think the idea was to kind of broaden the pool to make it a more national pool. And David and I really looked at it as an opportunity to create really a national cohort of scholars. Something I hadn't thought about until you were doing the introduction when you were mentioning. So I had been part of the ELON program, so the Drexel Executive Leadership and Academic Medicine program, which for any of the women on the call or women listening later, it's a phenomenal program for mid-career women to really grow your leadership skills and develop the academic leaders is really the idea of the program. But but in that program, part of that is that they set us up with learning communities. And I was when I did it in my cohort, I was in a group of 6 women from all different institutions, all in different leadership positions, but all, I mean, what somebody was in public health, somebody was actually a basic diabetes researcher, somebody was a gun violence researcher, like very different. And I think but having that peer network was really, really helpful to me. And I mean, even now, if I have a question about something I'm navigating with politics here or navigating with within my career, I have this group of people that are arm's length from me, but have a similar career trajectory to me. And that's a really invaluable source of support. So, and having run a local K-12 program from people from different institutions, I've seen that peer mentoring is really important too. So I think part of what we're hoping to do here is have people to be less siloed and interact with each other as well across the program. And I think that will be really beneficial.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, and is this also open to the MD PhDs, the MUDFUDs?
Yes, as long as they're still planning to practice clinically. But yeah, that's exactly the group.
Right.
The other thing with this program that's a little bit unique is it's restricted to type 1 diabetes research for the first few cohorts. So, and that's because the money for this program comes from the Special Diabetes Program money. And so the hope that NIDDK has is that, and what is said in the funding announcement, is that in the last few years of the program that we will have some spaces for type 2 research, but right now it would only be type 1, which is which kind of aligns with the other programs that are out there, which, you know, child neurology only does child neurology, critical care only does critical care, so pediatric critical care. So
yeah, that makes sense. I also feel or have heard sort of on the street that, you know, type 2 really has a lot of the market share right now, with interest from industry and also from funding sources. So this is a great way to create a space for, you know, type 1 to kind of grow some, you know, scientific legs in the clinical community too. We just have a question here. Is there a place in this program for those of us doing very basic research in beta cell physiology applicable to both types 1 and 2?
yeah, I think that fits. As we just actually got off a call immediately before this one with our program officer in NIDDK, and we were asking her if NIDDK had a strict definition of type 1, because we were like, we're getting questions like, is this applicable to type 1 or is that applicable? I think part of what we're still finalizing the application itself. Right now we have the call for letters of intent, and we're working within our group to finalize the application, but it's not going to be a very long or onerous application. We're trying to keep it short, and it's not going to be like a full K award. But on the other hand, we want to make sure we have the right elements in there. And one of the things that after talking to her, which Kamal just heard, that I think we will put in there, you know, something around, you, how is your research relevant to type 1 diabetes? Because you can make the case. But we anticipate having, I mean, we expect we will have everything from T0 to T4, you know, like all different across the spectrum. We suspect we may get a little less epidemiologic researchers, a fewer epidemiologic researchers, just because many of those people are PhDs rather than MDs. But as long as your research is in some way relevant to type 1 and can be tied to type 1, I think it will qualify in this, and that's exactly what we're looking for.
Is there any understanding of the landscape right now as it lays out, like what proportion or what number of MDs are doing research in the T1D space versus PhDs?
I don't know those numbers. I mean, they may be out there. I know that it's hard to keep physicians in research careers. There's a lot of things that pull. Endocrinology is not, and we also anticipate that people, I might just say really quickly as a like sidebar to myself that you don't have to be an endocrinologist to come into this program. We anticipate that most of the people coming in will either be pediatric or adult endocrinologists at the end of fellowship training, but certainly we are welcome, and we hope to have diversity in this program in so many ways, diversity across institutions, diversity across backgrounds, diversity across topics of research. I mean, we're going to be looking, we don't want everybody to look the same in the program in any way, shape, or form. And that was also very clearly specified in the call for applications. But so we anticipate, having ophthalmologists and nephrologists and maybe even OBGYNs doing just, type 1 in pregnancy. But in general, I will say as an endocrinologist, because I just was in clinic this morning prior to coming here, and the joke, not joke, as an endocrinologist, even now as a division chief, is that the more patients we see, the more money we lose in endocrinology. So if I'm not in clinic for a half day, my institution is not losing all this revenue from surgeries or from, I don't know, scopes or things like that, like other specialties. So in that sense, we're probably a little buffered in endocrinology. I'm mentoring right now an orthopedic surgeon, and he's like, well, how do I keep up my salary and my RVUs if I want to do research? And he's got a plan, and he's willing to make the sacrifices there. But I don't know the ratio. I mean, maybe somebody else on this call does, maybe somebody listening will know better between MDs and PhDs in this space. There are certainly a number of endocrinologists doing type 1 research. But there's also a great need in many great PhDs as well in the space.
Yeah. And as we've learned, just sort of reaching out to the community, there are definitely people who are coming from, interdisciplinary fields that are kind of, they're really making some headway in understanding things like, for instance, the neuroscience world is kind of like dipping its foot in and learning more about neurotransmission in the beta cell and things like that. So that's very interesting. I mean, would you even, would the neuro fellows be
maybe
too? I mean, you just don't know. So yeah, it's casting a great wide net, which is wonderful.
Yeah, and right now we're basically just trying to get the word out about this. So we just got the notice of award today, literally this afternoon. We knew that we had a notice of intent to pay, but we've been soldiering forward, anticipating that coming. And right now we're just trying to get the word out, because we know that the timing of getting in something between now and it's quick, right, to be funded in July 1st and have the first LOIs. But we wanted to be able to fund people starting as soon as January of this year.
Wow.
And then once we see how many applications we get, we see how many slots we fill. We can have up to 11 slots per year in the program, the way it was funded. So and once we figure out how many of the 11 we fill, then we'll see like when we'll have the next RFA and when we'll have the next funding. But we anticipate having at least an annual RFA for these sorts of things. And we anticipate having our first scholars, enrolled by January, which will be great.
And the LOI is due August 1. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so we have a couple of, oh good, here's Dr. Maahs. So you just have a couple of weeks now for people to kind of like learn about this and really get something together, right? It won't be that difficult though, right? The LOI is not too involved.
No, it's not. It's mostly just really just an LOI, just to say, and we're both mostly using the LOIs to assess eligibility and also to determine our reviewer pool. So it's a little bit like, that letter that some RFAs ask you to send in to say, I intend to apply for this RFA. The other thing is that we're planning on having a retreat for the program at the end of October, and we will do applicant interviews and do the study section by the end of October. So the plan is that we're also going to be able then to let people know, okay, you're eligible if you want to come at the end of October, this retreat, you'd be invited. Because we're hoping to have as many people as possible in person at the retreat. We will have some virtual options because we know we're going to have some hybrid component there. But I'll let David say hello since.
Let him say hi, and then we can maybe dig into the program components. Welcome, Dr. Maahs. David Maahs here from Stanford, I think. Can you unmute?
Monica, apologies first off for running late.
No worries at all.
I couldn't get out of, but I'm sure that I know that Linda and Dr. DiMeglio and Kamal were providing a good background on things. So I guess just briefly, I'm a pediatric endocrinologist at Stanford University. We have a K12 award right now. It's one of the old ones, and now NIDDK is transitioning into this national program, and so really excited to be able to work with Linda on this. We've been colleagues on multiple projects nationally the last decade or so or more. So really enjoy working with Linda, and we both are really excited about the program and the opportunity to help that next generation of physician scientists who are focused on type 1 diabetes to get their start and to get them able to have the opportunity to do research on a variety of areas in type 1 diabetes. So I'll be quiet now and just
that's fine. I mean, I think you're both are really well positioned and perfect, a perfect team to really get this initiative off the ground and select and collect just a really great diverse team to in their viewpoints and their trainings and everything to really kind of like push this forward. And I think it's so needed, and really hats off to both of you. So I wondered if you want to talk a little bit more about the program components. Do you both want to talk about it, or why don't you go first since you haven't been chatting?
Yeah, well, I'm smiling because Linda and I probably did maybe 50 Zoom calls with colleagues across the U.S. as we were preparing the proposal and wanting to reach out to as many colleagues as we could to let them know about what we were trying to do, and also to invite them to be part of the team. And so we developed, I think, a system of taking turns of starting out to explain what's going on, and inevitably whoever started would miss 2 or 3 things, and then we'd pick up for each other. So
perfect.
We'll do that. Where would you like me to start, Monica? What questions?
Well, how about like if you just talk about the program components, like centers involved, scholarship app process, then like how you plan for the scholar selection, the LOI interviews, retreat, which Dr. DiMeglio sort of touched on, this really cool retreat, maybe like a little sort of conference feel or something.
I've talked a little bit already, David, around the executive committee and the fact that we incorporate all those people, but other than that, we haven't talked about any of this yet.
Good. Well, and I might even take a step back from that. There may be people wondering what's a K12, and what a K12 is the Career Development Award, in this case from NIDDK, and specifically for this program, it is funded by Special Diabetes Program money, which is earmarked by Congress to have research in type 1 diabetes specifically. So what these K12 awards are, it will provide up to 3 years of support for a physician scientist who's interested in a career in research in academic medicine. They have to be someone who also is a physician and seeing patients. What this award will do is provide 75% protected time to do research. It also provides them $50,000 to support research. And then we also will make sure that each applicant will have a mentor that they apply for, and then that'll be supplemented by members of the national program as well. The goal of this program is then for people to be able to have that time to get started on their research career, and then to write what's called a K08 or a K23 Career Development Award, or JDRF has Career Development Award specific for type 1 diabetes. And those K08, K23, or JDRF awards are then the individual's awards. So in that sense, they're portable, whereas the K12 award, at least historically, had been tied into a center. And so previously there were 5 centers who had these K12 awards. And so you needed to go to one of those 5 centers to have this K12 opportunity. Now you could be anywhere across the US as long as you're a candidate and who is focusing in the areas mandated by the NIH FOA, and you have the mentor, but you don't need to be at those 5 places anymore. So we think it's going to add a lot of diversity to the program. And one of the other aspects that we're really excited about, Linda probably mentioned on our executive leadership committee, Dr. Shrita Golden from Johns Hopkins, who's the executive vice president for diversity in the Hopkins system. and she's leading our diversity efforts and specifically a program we're calling DiabDOCS to try to increase the pipeline of people who are underrepresented in medicine, and as physician scientists to try to increase people to come into diabetes research. I think we all benefit by a more diverse workforce, and so we're really looking forward to Dr. Golden working with her on that. So Linda, I've been talking a while here. What other things did I miss? Just kind of talking about the program in big picture.
I don't think you missed much. I wonder if anyone has any questions on the big picture of the program, we can take those now.
I mean, I guess I would ask, what are going to be the hesitations for these physicians if they're in their fellowship or whatever to try to sort of jump into this? And I know you sort of touch on the fact, like, how am I going to get, you get 75% protected time to do research. So what about the rest of your training? Like, what about that balance?
Yeah, I think that is a balance. I think people have to be willing to kind of take that leap. And I do meet some people that decide that they really want to use the first couple of years after their fellowship to really, a couple of my very junior faculty, I'm sure David has this too, because we're both division chiefs, say to me, I really want to make sure I'm a really good clinician before I try to do anything else. And so I think this K award system is sometimes best almost, some people like knew from the moment they started, whatever, middle school, grade school, like for me, I didn't decide I wanted to be a researcher until really as a second year fellow. So I was later to do this, to take this path. But many people have always known, and they actually will do even like an accelerated program. We see that occasionally in the K program I run now, but most people come out of their fellowship residency, they get their terminal degree, and they kind of get their feet under them initially a little bit with some protected time, ideally for research, but they may then take a little while to germinate, so to speak. And so these programs are permissive about that. There is a way to enter, even if you've been doing clinical work, like to come in a little later in your career to do it. But then basically that 25% of your time needs to be clinical time. So that is usually on-call time, clinic time. For me, that was enough to build my skill set. I didn't do more. Although now as a later career, as David reminds me all the time, physician, I've toned a little bit more where I do my clinical work. But but the idea being that then the other 75% of your time is spent on research and on a primary project, because it also I was able to be successful doing both diabetes and bone, but it took a while to do it. I had career development awards in both. But most people will focus in on an area and maybe look at dimensions of that area and then carry that forward. And the idea with this is to give you that extra support for that year or two before you apply for a national one of the nationally competitive K awards. A different kind of nationally competitive K, but a NIDDK K.
So the sweet spot for jumping into this or applying to this may be towards the end of your fellowship.
Well, you have to be on faculty, so you have to have a guaranteed faculty award.
Okay.
One of the things that we're looking at is actually the institutional commitment to the because we know that many people, even if the idea behind this program, we would love to fund people ideally 1 to 2 years in the program. We can fund up to 3, but then we don't have more room for people coming in behind until they get their other K award. But oftentimes there needs to be some institutional support, because if you say you exit the 3 years of this program and you don't yet have your K, which happens, you need to make sure you have the support. And often there has to be a little bit of these grants also don't give very much project money, so some money from the institution around that is often helpful.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about the LOI. So when someone's, framing up their LOI and they have this idea, how much wiggle room is there for the idea to evolve from what you originally put in to what, the actual, goods, basically?
Yeah, I'd say there's a fair bit of room there. Now it needs to be focused on type 1 diabetes. That's something that we don't have a whole lot of flexibility on. But that could be interpreted, say, for some basic science projects, could be interpreted broadly. However, the applicant would want to explain in their application how the research they're doing, say, on beta cells, applies to type 1 diabetes. But there can be cross-cutting science that, in beta cells, it may apply to a MODY, it may apply to type 2 diabetes, it may apply to type 1. Tell us how it applies to type 1 diabetes research, but there may be, like I said, cross-cutting research. So the intent of the LOI is to give us a sense of how many people are going to put in a full proposal, gives us an idea of who we need to recruit to be on the study section to review the grants, so that we've got appropriate reviewers. And as Linda said, we also then plan to have a retreat and invite people who put in their proposals to be able to attend that as well. So we have some logistics, obviously, with planning that retreat and travel and lodging as well.
Yeah, the other thing though, the other next step of that is also from the time you submit, because there's not gonna be much time between submitting a letter of intent and submitting a grant. It's just not the way it's going to work, at least this cycle. Hopefully in future years we'll have more time between them. But the other thing that we know is that we want to have work with people on their projects and give them feedback on their proposed project. So a lot of the weighting of the scoring of the candidates, which will mirror like standard NIH K scoring for the candidates, but a lot of that will focus on the candidate more than or actually more candidate as well as the project. And so part of what we built in this program, which we haven't yet run yet, because this will be our first time through, is like some project development time where we're going to look at the projects, have some external people look at the work that's proposed, and then give feedback and help hone the project, help figure things out, maybe connect to other people around the project. Because that oftentimes people in their K applications propose projects that are overambitious, even for like a 4 or 5 year award. So we want to make sure it's something that's doable, and something that's going to lead to the next incremental step in the research.
Yeah, that makes total sense. So this might not be, maybe you can't even answer this, but if someone wants to be competitive in their application, would you, is it going to be about sort of like ideas that move the ball forward a little bit in known spaces like islet implantation or bioinformatics, or is it, or could it be something totally novel and very, very different, coming out of, neuroscience, or even out of, who knows, cardiac or something along those lines? Are you inviting any and all, or is there any tips you want to give at this moment to those who are applying to sort of like encourage their competitiveness?
Yeah, so
yeah.
with the previous programs, the previous K-12 programs, they were 4 of them had been focused entirely on pediatric diabetes and pediatric endocrinologists, and then the 5th one that we had was both pediatric and adult. And then with this K-12, it can be, you could be an ophthalmologist and be doing research on diabetic retinopathy. You could be a nephrologist and interested in diabetic kidney disease in type 1 diabetes. So it's pretty broadly defined, but again, it has to come back to being research focused on type 1 diabetes. So I think we do intend for this to be broad. I think we anticipate there's probably going to be more endocrinologists who are applying for this, but we're not restricting it. And I think then it just comes down to the quality of the proposal, and some of that is, what is the project, what's the topic you're working on, but also then the candidate and their mentorship team and the institutional support as well.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it really, it's just a great plan, I think. Can you sort of tap a little bit on the success in the neuro community that this type of program has had, and maybe kind of give some, I guess sort of like a 50,000 foot view of where this program might also go?
Yeah, so thanks. And I think, both Linda and I are really appreciative of being able to talk with and get some help and support from both the critical care, the pediatric critical care K-12 program that I believe they're in maybe their 15th year, 18th year, something like that. So that was really the first program. And then the pediatric neurology or K-12 is also a national program, and I think they're in their 7th or 8th, 9th year, something like that. And so both those programs have really developed a national community. And that's something we'd like to be able to develop, is not only those 11 people at a time who are on the K-12 and getting funding and part of the program, but we also want to figure out how to help the people who applied and maybe didn't get it their first time. They've expressed an interest in wanting to do research in type 1 diabetes. We may not have funding for everyone, but how can we help them come back the next year and have a stronger application? How can we help them in their career to be part of the type 1 diabetes research community as well? So that is something that we're very focused on. We need to get through this first round and get our first group of K-12 scholars selected, but then we also want to make sure that we've got that community of support for others who are interested in doing research. And sometimes it takes you 1 or 2 times to get that first funding, but we want to be encouraging. And there's a lot of work to be done, and we need a motivated and younger workforce to build for the future.
Yeah, you need them with their hands still wet, right, at the laboratory bench. And with the newest techniques and protocols and, the RNA scope and everything else, so that they can kind of float along with them. I think, I think the templates are there, right? That this is a successful strategy, both in the critical care and the neurospace. And so it makes really great sense that you're bringing it to the T1D, physician scientists world. And I really can't wait to sort of follow and see what happens. The idea is really wonderful. And I don't know if you want to add anything else. I mean, are there any other questions in the audience? Okay, here's one. You mentioned that you anticipate funding to start in January with need for faculty commitment. Is this something that graduating fellows would need bridge funding to starting in July to apply for this cycle? That's a great question.
Yeah, great question. And we just received our notice of award today. So the fact we've actually been able to get started, we just hired Kamal as our program administrator a couple of weeks ago. So she's been busy at work to get Linda and I organized and to get the program developed, the retreat, the application process. We've got an email address. We're working on having a web page. So there's a lot of logistical work that we need to do, and we're just really getting started with it. And then the whole question of how quickly could you turn this program around, get things set up, brand new program, and then have a process to be able to select, for people to apply, for people to then be selected to be on the K-12 program. We just didn't think there was no way we could get it started, we think, before January to have a study section, a retreat, et cetera, et cetera. Going forward, we are contemplating whether a better start day would be July 1 versus January 1, but we need to get through this first cycle, and that January 1 start date was really the fastest we thought was responsible to propose to do. And so, so Chrissy, do you want to, I'm dancing around your question and unintentionally trying to give background. So are you a third year fellow? When do you graduate, I guess is the question.
Yeah, so sorry, I know that this is being recorded for other people, so I don't want to take up too much time, but so I'm actually a 4th year fellow because I fast tracked into peds endo. So I'm kind of trying to plan ahead to my need for bridge funding. Starting next July. And so I was just kind of wanting to make sure that it would make sense for me to apply this cycle, or if you have other advice. So
you're finishing your 4th year fellowship in
July 2023.
Yeah, so you wouldn't be eligible to do it yet. So you'll have to just wait and see, because you need to be, we're planning on trying to find people that we can fund in January. So as faculty in January. So you have to have a faculty commitment from your institution. We are, so one of the other what other national K-12 programs actually requires, actually maybe they both do, David, they require some institutional commitment for funding, and we're thinking that if we stick with the January start date going forward, we may give credit kind of for that institutional commitment prior to the January start date, if that makes sense. So that if we asked an institution to guarantee at least 18 months of funding in addition to the 2 to 3 years on the K, that we would you may get credit for that early time. But I mean, at least we don't know what'll happen with its initial cycle. And with this particular pool of applicants, in my role running the K program here in Indiana through our CTSA, I find that the best candidates generally, we have occasionally funded people straight out of fellowship, but the best candidates generally have a couple years of on faculty for some of the reasons you mentioned, you alluded to, I guess, earlier, Monica, like they've gotten some clinical stuff behind them. They're kind of ready to start. They've already got some research. Now, if you're already fast tracked and you've already been in a research career, you will probably be ready to apply for K at the end of your fellowship. But most people graduating fellowship are not, because they need that time to kind of mature into research. I also applied and as a third year fellow. And so it is possible. But we will, what I would say is if we know about you or know about people like you, we'd be happy to kind of also welcome you to kind of start observing things in the program. I anticipate starting some of the career development training in the spring. And although some of those sessions will really focus on generating that core group of peers that I mentioned earlier, some of them will be open to everybody as kind of more open webinars with discussion, with still that core group of our the scholars in the program going through, but also allowing other people to kind of hear that curriculum, listen in, provide feedback. And I've been doing that here locally, where we have about half our sessions which are smaller, and then the other half of the sessions are larger. So for sure, get your name in our database, so to speak, as Kamal builds it, and we can let you know. But and whether or not we start funding going forward in July or January will depend a little bit on this first pool and to see what we get, because of the two model programs that we had, the child neurology and the pediatric critical care, one critical care starts in January, child neuro starts in July. And literally, David and I went back and forth about what start date for this particular grant so often that we'd forgotten by the time we got funded. We had to go back and look at our application with the January start date. But anyway, long answer, apologies, but we're still in formation, basically.
And I would encourage people to apply as early as they're eligible, and get your name in there, get your proposal in, and give it a try. So we're really excited. We want to get as many people as possible applying, and try to get as many people funded as we can.
Yeah, and I just put the email address in the chat just so people also later online will have it. So if you can get your name in if you want to Kamal, and then we can make sure you also get mailings. I saw you sent some individualized ones out today or yesterday, Kamal, about the webinars and things we're having. So that way you just have you in our database.
Yeah, and that email is DiabDOCS K12 at stanford.edu. So it's DiabDOCS K12 at stanford.edu.
Yep.
So it sounds like those of us who won't be faculty till next summer, maybe send the email to get on the emailing list. But no point in putting in an LOI this year.
No, we won't. Yeah, you have to have a faculty position to be able to, and we're planning on funding starting in January.
Okay,
if we don't get enough,
that's
if
really
we don't get enough applications to then we'll do it again in July. If not, it will be the following January. We'll see.
So there's a potential that there would be this round, the LOI due in August 1st, and then again next July. But
maybe do again in February to try to fund people for next July. But we'll see.
Okay. Yeah. Well,
we're holding. We're a new program. We're just getting started. So we're David and I have decided together, and Kamal has let us decide as our new program administrator that we're gonna reserve a final decision on that until we just need to see how this runs. I mean, we know the program will run. We know the program will be. It's funded, which is great. We know we have money to pay people, and we have some really good models, and we've actually incorporated into our advisory committees and into kind of the group, the people that are already running these K programs nationally, because we believe in looking at their models as our example, but we know our community will be a little bit different and we just kind of have to see how it goes.
And
But we're really so excited.
And we'll be listening to feedback from others. I think people will have opinions on whether, it's better to start in January, better start in July. And so we'll be listening. So
Yeah,
that's
you're
fantastic.
really excited you're going to apply to the program.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking earlier in the event that, how many MD PhD programs and graduates there are currently in the US. And, the statistics from 2016, basically from AAMC, show that there were 1,936 MD PhD program applicants and then 602 graduates. So quite an attrition rate there, but yeah, 602, right, nationally. So, and those are really people that are pretty squarely focused on, clinical research or being in the clinic and in the lab. So then hopefully you're aiming at those folks that are interested in type 1, and then outside of that, right, anybody who's who is also involved in clinical research that pertains to type 1 diabetes. So
it doesn't have to be clinical, any kind of research that would be relevant. Yes, any kind of research relevant to type 1.
Any research. So you could even do epidemiological research. You could do bioinformatics. You could do anything across the board.
Yeah, we're really I'm really personally hoping for that. So again, with my experience here with my program, I mean, the program I'm part of here, it's not my program per se, but like we have people doing work on, like in the computer, and they all have to be clinical researchers. So even then it's more narrow, but we have people doing everything who are MDs who are working in a lab with something that like to try to move it forward to a clinical component, to engineers actually in that program, which would not be eligible for this program, but engineers doing like patient communication in the electronic medical record and tracking and trying to facilitate referrals. I mean, I think it's really awesome. I think it's going to be a lot of fun to get to know all these different areas of science as we get to know all the different scholars. And I really believe that we cast a very broad net of sites, and we really made it a national program from the moment we applied. And like you said early, Monica, like this is when we reached out to people to say that we wanted to do this program and we wanted to run it, we got incredible support. And we also, people saw it like we did, I think, as a labor of love to kind of just to bring this forward to like basically the next generation of researchers in our field. So
to fortify, the path to becoming, a research scientist. I mean, it's a tough road to hoe. I mean, because, you've got these people that are trying to really be in the clinical space and the research space at this point in time when they're coming out of their fellowship. They probably have a young family, or they may have a young family. There's a lot of things to balance. So I think the fact that you're offering this, this financial support, but really even probably more valuable is the sort of mentorship and the growth of this community, the network that you're attempting to kind of like, right, create, and you've got to create a super saturated solution and throw a crystal in and really expand it. Right?
I like that.
Going.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of visualizations. I'll let David talk too, but and so I have this, we try to figure out in the grant too, how do we explain our connection to each other? He's to the bottom left, so I keep pointing to my screen, but and then the people, the networks and things that we have. I love the idea of a super saturated solution making one.
Yeah.
We'll carry that forward.
Yeah.
Go ahead, David.
And Monica, I think you're absolutely right. When you're a fellow, you have protected time to do research and educational experiences. Then once you join a faculty, you need to pay your salary, and that's kind of the reality. And if you have a grant like this K12, then you've got that time that's paid for to have that research development, and allows you to grow as a physician scientist, to be able to write then that next grant, which will likely be a K08 or a K23. And that will give you can be on the K12, K08, K23 series for up to 6 years total. And that really gives you that time to build a CV, develop your research skills and methods, develop your community of mentors and collaborators. And then all of a sudden you have to apply for an R award or other awards like that, which are even more competitive.
Yes.
And so having this pathway really sets you on that road to have a greater chance for success. And part of what Linda and I really like about this grant is it's successful if the people on the grant are successful.
Right.
That's how our success will be measured is, okay, how did those people who got the K-12 do? Did they get their awards to move on and be successful? And then we will then feel like we've done our job, and we would hope then 5 years from now we would be able to go back to NIDDK and say, look, here's what we've done. We think we should continue to do this for another 5 years, or maybe even make it bigger. If we funded 11, maybe we can fund 15.
Yeah.
Of course, there's always limitations on budgets, but that's really the goal, is how can we get more people successfully focused on research in type 1 diabetes.
Yeah.
I'll say one other thing that both David and I have built our career on team science in many ways. And I was lucky that I went up for promotion at one point in my career at a time when IU had just written into its guidelines team science. So even though an external letter came through and said, Linda has not generated much on her own, but works in teams, the committee came back and said, oh my goodness, like the teams like that, this is fine. Like we recognize her clear role in teams. And so the other part, one of my mentors when I was earlier in my career said to me, and we say this to our scholars a lot, that when you go from a K to an R, a K pays 75% of your salary. The R will only ever pay 25, 30% of your salary. So you need to have multiple irons in the fire, and you had to have multiple things kind of going on at the same time, which is daunting in order to be successful in this field. And part of what I hope to generate with this program is those networks and connections that will allow people to stay successful. Because if I came out of my K, when my K was in osteogenesis imperfecta, metabolic bone, if I had only done OI, I would not be sitting here today doing research, just because I also had something in diabetes, which is not an approach I would sanction, although I'm happy to advise people on how to do it. But I have other friends who have made dual careers successful. But if I hadn't been thinking about diabetes, and then when things like opportunities like the exchange came up, and David and I were part of that, then the exchange eventually had its life cycle, and now there's still the National Quality Improvement, but that's different and funded in a different way. So by thinking about different areas, and each of us, one of the nice things for the two of us putting this grant together and reaching out to people and doing all those Zoom calls is that we each had different networks. And even now we each send emails to different people. And part of what I really want to generate within the program, I'm an introvert, David's an extrovert. But even as an introvert, I'm passionate about connecting people. And so I want to make sure that, the Christies and Tiffany's and those people that are in the program, as they come forward, that they walk out with those connections. Because especially for those who are introverts, it's really sometimes hard to do that. And that's served me very well in my career. And it's what I really want to engender for other people.
Well, and Linda, just to add on that, what's been really nice this last year is starting to be able to go to conferences in person again. And I think some of our fellows had missed that for 2 years of junior faculty. And I think it's been really nice to have those networking opportunities. We can do things on Zoom, but I think we'd all agree it's really nice to get to meet people in person. Zoom's much better than a phone call, but and it does provide a lot of advantages and benefits that we didn't have in the past.
Yeah.
But to have that interaction is really important.
We also have some part of what we're going to do in this program is have not only the retreat once a year for like scholar selection and networking of the scholars and things like that, but we're also going to try to put together like a places for our scholars to present their research.
That's great.
Yeah. And Monica, when we talked, like I was like, we had this program, we want to talk to you about the program, and eventually we'll have scholars that could talk about their research. But the in this kind of setting, or in like at the ADA, to have an afternoon where that's part of the budget we wrote in the grant, was to be able to rent a room and have space for our scholars to present as a way to advertise the program, but also as a way to get, they can put that presentation on their CV. The other thing that the program will incorporate is something we've done through the CTSAs now, is a visiting scholar program, where we're going to try to, during the time that the scholar is in the program, we're going to send them to another institution that's got some connection to the program to give a talk and network with people there. Again, that's been very successful within the CTSAs, and I hope to bring it into this K program as well.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And it's a really, I think that has a powerful, it's just a very powerful thing to really get people in out of their comfortable space and into another space, and listening to different and diverse ideas is so critical. I guess I would just say, that here at the Sugar Science, we're just barely 2 years old. We now have a listening audience of 30,000. And it is interesting to us. We've heard back from a lot of fellows actually that they like to, put on their earbuds and listen to the podcast because they're kind of strapped for time. They're kind of tired. And they, if they're either at the bench, just sort of pipetting or whatever, they're, whatever, trying to exercise, they listen to it. So, this is a good opportunity for those that are listening that are in that wheelhouse, or that, to reach out and participate in this excellent opportunity, where you, maybe if you're at your end of fellowship, maybe even next year, or if you're squarely in a position already, certainly, reach out and start the ball rolling. That LOI is coming up in just about 2 weeks and change, 3 weeks. 3 weeks. So, get your laptop out and start typing up that LOI.
Agree. Yeah. Thank you, Monica.
Thanks so much for having us and listening to us talk about our program. So,
it's
and
fantastic. Hats off for both of you for taking this on top of your already incredibly busy and important schedules. Thanks for all you do for type 1, and really this and this extra thing that you're doing here. It has so much potential to be such a incredibly good force for good. Thanks again. Have a great rest of your weekend.
All right.